Did you vacillate between feeling blissful about feeding your baby, but also being filled with doubt that perhaps you weren't producing enough for your baby? And maybe this doubt didn't come from looking at your baby, but rather from trying to pump and seeing that no milk was coming into the bottles. And then you thought, well, if I can't get milk into these bottles, then maybe my baby isn't getting milk. My guest today had this experience, particularly with her first, and then she did something about it, which you will hear about on Thursday. So I cannot wait for you to hear both her personal stories and then the innovation that she came up with as a result, which you'll have to wait for. So enjoy this beautiful story with my guest, Eva. When I began breastfeeding, I was blindsided by how difficult it was. Having known only a handful of people who had ever done it and only seeing it up close a couple of times, I had a huge learning curve. Since then, I've become a doula, a childbirth educator, and an internationally board-certified lactation consultant, or an IBCLC. I'm your host, Lo Nigrosh, and I welcome you to the Milk Making Minutes, where we explore the systemic, medical, and cultural barriers that make feeding our babies so difficult, so that you know your baby feeding struggles are not your fault, and your triumphs really are the miracles you feel they are.
So my name is Eva Nagy-Gannon. I am coming from Hungary originally. That's where I was born. And I moved to Ireland about 13 years ago. And I only was coming for 1 year to study the language, but never went back. And this is where I met my husband. He's from England, and we have two beautiful boys now. One of them was born in 2014, the other one 2019. So that's our little family here. I am the founder of the Kala manual breast pump that mimics suckling. And before that, I was working in business. So I have a master's degree in economics. And that's what I was doing up to the point of my first pregnancy, where when your life is just kind of turns upside down and it's just, everything is reshuffled. And so a career and everything just came to a stop, and it was all about the baby for a good 2 years, 2.5 years. Yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell. That's who I am and where I am at the moment. I live in Galway, Ireland. And yeah.
Well, so I want to take you back to your childhood, to your upbringing, and have you think about your exposure to baby feeding and breastfeeding before you were even thinking about parenthood yourself. And tell me what your exposure was. Did you mostly see bottle feeding? Did you know anybody who breastfed? Were you surrounded by that? What was your cultural upbringing when it came to babies?
Right. So it was very little. It was a very little input and very little information that I would have been exposed to or would have seen as a child. Back in the times when I was born, the basic kind of procedure was when the baby was born, instantly they were taken into a separate room where the babies are kept in one room and the moms were kept in another room. And 3 or 4 times a day, they were kind of delivered to the moms for a quick feed, and they went back to their separate rooms, right? So it was like a very kind of distant kind of relationship that was kind of enforced institutionally. And pretty fast, moms were switching to formula feeding. After they were coming out of the hospital, obviously everybody was working 8 hours, 3 shifts. That was kind of the standard back in those days. Like, I was born in the socialist era in Hungary. So the whole system was very structuralized for everyone and very institutionalized. So pretty much after 6 months, you are in a crash. Every baby is in a crash, and mommy is back to work after a few months. So it was very distant, and there wasn't much consideration around breastfeeding whatsoever. And that was kind of the picture I was growing up with. So when I was kind of ready to have my own babies and was planning, I knew for sure that that's not what I want. I really wanted to have like a very close skin to skin contact as much as possible, exclusive breastfeeding as long as is humanly possible. So I wanted to kind of achieve quite the opposite of that, what I saw. And interesting enough, actually, when I reached the stage and I had a chat with my grandma about it, she said that back when she was a young girl, which is like a good few decades ago, the way moms were breastfeeding, then the way moms were treated when they gave birth, is that they were, for a good few months, just all their job was to lie in bed. Baby was there, breastfeed when it's necessary, but it was like 4 or 5 other moms, 4 or 5 other neighbors around to do everything else, like even changing the nappies, cleaning the house, cooking, everything. So it was understood to be a very precious time, and it's a very sort of challenging and demanding times for the moms, even just for being able to breastfeed and recover her own body. It was understood that that's enough work for a mom to look after for those few months. And that really stuck with me, because I know that our mother's life setup is not set up in that way, not set up with that amount of support and help. It felt very perfect the way she was describing. And I was wondering, why did that knowledge got lost somewhere in the way? I mean, I'm still speaking here with a lady who experienced that firsthand, and already her own daughter growing up and having her own babies was completely different, stuck in a hospital and then shoved back into work and formalized the basic. And it was just interesting. But I was definitely, she totally kind of convinced me that's what I would like to aim for, even though it's going to be harder for me, because I'm sure I'm not going to have all that support around me. But that felt like the right way to do.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Did your grandma have any insight into, how people felt about breastfeeding, or how difficult or easy it was given that environment?
She was a lady from a time when everything was like, you just do it. You just do it. There's no real in-depth considerations about it. You just do it. You just get on with it. But in a relaxed sense, right? So it's not like that they didn't care about the details. It was just, they were kind of living in that confidence of like, well, that's the natural way, so it's gonna happen. It's not gonna be an issue. So she wasn't telling me any of like difficulties or what to look out for. She didn't have tips and advice around, if you experience engorged nipple, engorged breasts, or you have mastitis, what to do. No information there. But she was giving me that sense of, well, this is a natural thing, and it's, for the majority of time, it's just going to work out, because that's how it has been evolved over millions of years. So yeah, you'll be fine.
Yeah. And you know what? In those environments, I've talked to quite a few people whose relatives grew up in these environments where your only job was literally to feed your baby. And in those environments, you reduce so many barriers to breastfeeding that I do think that the majority of people just successfully breastfed with very little difficulty, because you're not adding on layer and layer and layer of stress and extra barriers. And so it does then become way more possible for the vast majority of people to breastfeed with ease when you have 5 to 12 people surrounding you, helping you do it and taking care of all the other tasks that you need to do. And that is literally your only job. And that's how humans evolved. We had 5 to 12 allo parents who helped us parent our babies. And you were not the only person who was taking care of your baby and your children.
Exactly.
So that makes sense to me that she would be like, you just did it.
You just did it. And also when you're surrounded by people, like, there was obviously a lot of young girls who, like the mom said, yeah, go over and help whoever who just had a baby.
Right.
So from a young age, you see it. And from a young age, you also see if there's any difficulties or challenges, what they do about it. And it just becomes such a natural passive knowledge in your head that it's, you're just automatically going to apply these things when the time comes for you. So that's that's the sense I got from her, that it was just so normal. It's like brushing your teeth, like you don't really think about it because it just happens because you have seen it and done it so many times. But it's just second nature.
Yes, exactly. And that is how these things pass down. You didn't need IBCLCs like me because it was cultural knowledge that was shared.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. And now we do need people like me because it was lost. It took just one generation to lose it, one generation of changing.
Isn't that crazy?
How we did things. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? That is like that knowledge almost is like you and other ABCSCs are like the light, who still holds that knowledge, because otherwise culturally it doesn't translate anymore like it did back in the old days when.
Right. I was just talking to another IBCLC of mine, a good friend, 2 days ago, and she said she has a lot of trouble sharing information if it's not science-based, if it's not evidence-based. And I said, yes, I get that. And we have to remember that lactation is part science and part art. So much of the cultural knowledge that was shared from mom to mom, from parent to parent before there were IBCLCs it wasn't evidence-based. It wasn't research-based. It wasn't peer-reviewed. It was just, this is what has worked for me and my family and your aunt and your cousin. And so I'm sharing this with you. And so it's fine for us to say to our clients, this is evidence-based. And this is what I have seen work for lots of clients, even though there's not a lot of science to back it up. And this is what I've heard other people say works, even though I might not have seen it work with my clients. So feel free to try these things and tell me how it works for you, because there's so little research that goes into breastfeeding and human milk feeding that sometimes we do need to pass along things that culturally people say work, even though it's not peer-reviewed scientific information, because there's so little of that out there, and because breastfeeding has been something that was passed down culturally to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. And do you need to kind of distinguish when you're kind of giving advice like that?
I like to because they're coming to me because I have an expertise in something. And so if my expertise is like, yeah, I see this working, but I don't know why it works. We don't have studies to show that it works. Then I want somebody to know that, because there are some people who are really like scientifically minded. And then, there are people who are like, oh, I'll try anything. It doesn't really matter to me if there's a study to back it up. So I like people to know, because it does matter to me that we are a profession based on the clinical research. And, we're also dealing with human beings and babies in a profession where there's not a lot of research.
Yeah.
Compared to some other fields, at least.
I was just thinking about the significance of that kind of knowledge and support being there for moms from the get-go, when you have your newborn, and what level of knowledge you are surrounded with and what level of help you are surrounded with, and the significance of that to establish kind of good routine with breastfeeding. And I recently saw a lady did a study in the UK about babies who were born over the weekend are finish breastfeeding way sooner than babies who were born during the week. And the only factor that is differentiating these things is that lactation consultants only work during the weekdays in the hospital in the UK. And it was just giving me the shivers of how significant that is. And, that we have that knowledge now. And I wish that there would be more done about that, like to understand and accept the fact that it's really important to have moms or lactation consultants around you in those first few days, because it just makes all the difference in how successful you're going to be.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so when you spoke with your grandmother, was it before or after you were preparing for your own children?
That was already during my pregnancy, because she saw me like I kind of like to gather information. I must be one of those, science minds as well that appreciate a lot of written material and proof and all of that to prepare myself for something. So yeah, she saw me kind of head down in the books about breastfeeding and how to do that. And she was a little bit sort of giggling to herself, that I'm trying to get all that information from the paper as opposed to, having a real life experience. I haven't seen it around me or having chats with someone. So that's how it all came up. And yeah, like for her, it was like she wasn't even thinking about it at that time. Only just because she saw me reading a book, that's what kind of triggered the conversation. Because for her, it was such a natural thing, that it wouldn't even come to her mind that, oh yeah, we were breastfeeding when I was young. That was the thing. So yeah.
Did she have any thoughts about the change and how the postpartum period is happened for her daughter?
No, I didn't think so. Or at least she never mentioned that at that time. She didn't mention that.
Okay.
My mom, I know that my mom, she only in retrospect, obviously, because when you are in a situation, you are sort of you're the creation of the culture a little bit. So you not just don't question how things are done, but you don't even think that there's anything wrong with it. So for her, the routine, whatever was established in the hospital, seemed like the right thing to do because at that time, that was the knowledge. And everybody had to do the same thing. So it was only decades later when she was like, oh, I wish. And it's so great to see that moms are breastfeeding now and have all that contact with their little ones. And yeah, so she would have preferred, of course, in retrospect, to do it that way. So
yeah. Okay. So then you're pregnant and you're preparing, head down in the books.
Head down in the books, preparing, to become the perfect mom.
So, and you had all these hopes to feed human milk for as long as possible. What were other things you were doing besides reading? Was there anything else that you did to kind of?
To be honest with you, not for the breastfeeding. I think I left that for after, which looking back at it now, like if I would have any advice for anyone who is pregnant now, I would definitely suggest to kind of go to a few of those local breastfeeding meetings that moms and peer moms are organizing for themselves or through these networks that exist. Because it's great to have a sense. It's great to kind of just soak up a little bit of that knowledge, a little bit of that sense of ease and comfort that moms already have. I didn't pay attention to that. I was looking at through the books of like, what are the positions? How does a correct latch looks like? And all those things that are possible to write down in a book. But I would so do that now. If I would have a baby now, I would definitely go to these meetings while I'm still pregnant, to build up a bit of, also to make a few connections. So when the time comes and I have difficulty, it's not going to be like, oh, I don't know anyone. Okay, or there are those groups that I've never seen those people. So it's a bit harder to kind of make that move. But if you already have something established, that makes it a little bit easier. So I only prepared from the books, and I a little bit regret that.
Yeah.
But it's like,
you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know. And it sorted itself out because obviously the first time I was running into some issues, they were there. So it was easy enough to kind of make the move there and make up connections. So like at that time in 2014, when I had my first baby, there wasn't all the big social platforms active, but I think it was mainly Facebook. So there was like Facebook groups and then local meetings of moms from that Facebook group who would kind of breastfeed and share our knowledge, which was absolutely great. It was, for me, that was the biggest help, to have other moms around who go through something similar and just give you a few tips and advices and say, oh, if you don't hold it 40 said like this, but hold it like that, a little bit different, that's already sorted out. Or, it was excellent. It was really, really helpful.
I can't wait to hear more about that. But I want to back you up a little bit and have you talk about your experience. Did you give birth in a hospital?
Yeah, I gave birth in a hospital here in Ireland. The way it goes is that you have midwives with you. So there's no doctor present unless there is some complication that makes it necessary, which is fantastic. I think the Irish midwives are just amazing. Very calm, very kind of woman focused. It's like it's not, it doesn't feel clinical. It feels like you're surrounded by people who are medically trained, but also they are very kind of human. You're surrounded by people as opposed to doctors and nurses. It's somehow different. So I had a very nice experience giving birth in the hospital, and it ended up being necessary as well. Like, obviously I had dreams about being doing a home birth, but that I didn't go for it. I can't remember now why exactly I didn't go for it in the end. I suppose there was just like a little doubt of like what happens if something happens. To have access to hospitals straight away. That was just lit it up. This is my first baby. I just didn't want it to take that risk. I think I heard you say in one of your previous episodes, it's like when it comes to the baby, between the safe option or trying out something special, you would always go for the safe option because it's your baby. So yeah, so hospital birth, but it was great, natural birth, and they left us there, the baby on the breast, so the baby could kind of crawl up and take his first little sip of something, or at least putting my nipple into his little mouth. So it was great. And they let us stay there as a family for like an hour and a half or so before my husband had to leave. So it was a really nice, very nice experience. Yeah. And then you stay with your baby in a hospital room, obviously sharing with other moms as well. But you're constantly together with the baby. But just to give an idea of how unexperienced of a mom I was, that the nurse was coming in, I think, in a few hours after the baby was born. And I told her, like, I don't know how to change a nappy. I never changed a nappy before. And she said, oh, don't worry, I'll come back and we'll do it together. So she went, and she didn't came back until the next day. So I waited until the next day because I didn't realize that you have to change a nappy a bit more regular than that, right? So that's the level. That's the level. And we kind of took the nappy off together, and poor little thing was kind of crossed it into his own black goo. But it was fine. No. It was fine, but it just kind of shows how much stuff you cannot get from books really when you prepare. And yeah, that was the point where I started breastfeeding as well. It all went really well. Now, I must say there wasn't a great deal of help in that, right? So I think a lactation consultant came around just for like 10 minutes on the third day with a leaflet saying, breastfeeding is great. I can see that looks like a latch. That's fine. Keep on going. If you need any if you have any issues, there is a local support group, and off she went. So that was kind of the level. Now that's 2014. So it might be different by now. So we went home with that level of knowledge and started with the breastfeeding journey. And it was, I must say, the first baby was stressful. So this kind of hyper attention to details kind of stayed with me. Is the latch okay? Is he eating enough? The $1 million question: does the baby drink enough milk? Does he get enough milk? And especially that my husband was very keen to feed him as well. So I was trying to use breast pumps. And when I used breast pump, nothing really came out. So another doubt set in my head that, like, if I can't see anything in the bottle, then my baby is not getting any milk, So there was this constant doubt. And I always had formula ready to go because I was so stressed about whether the baby's going to get enough or not, So there came a few evenings when me and my husband were just like, no, we need to give for real. No, we don't need to. Yes, we do. There's these moments.
I know so many people listening are going to relate to this, having the can there and just
Yeah.
looking at it and
Yeah.
wondering, is this the moment? Should I? Wanting to do the right thing for your baby, and also knowing what supplementing can do for your supply. So knowing that it can be a bit precarious, especially those who have researched and read the books. And, some people are like, whatever, I'll do both. They start supplementing right away and they don't care. But people who really, really, really want to exclusively breastfeed, but also really, really, really care about the health of their babies, of course, that anxiety sets in. And if you have nobody there to reassure you and help you to understand, the signs that help you know that your baby is getting enough, oh my gosh, it can be so stressful.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly that mindset we were in, this kind of stressed mindset of like giving or not giving. Sometimes we did give, when you have your baby crying there, doesn't want to latch, but it might be something, other reason why he's not latching. So, um, and this obviously only came clear to me much later when you start meeting moms and start seeing how they are doing. And, like you need a great deal, a good chunk of reassurance to balance out the stress, right? So somebody just saying, you'll be fine. That's not enough. That's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it. So we were this. I remember one night clearly when it was around 11 p.m. or something, baby just crying and not latching, clearly keen to eat, or at least, that little face when he's like really pushing his nose and his mouth into the breast and the nipple and trying, I'm not sure whether nothing is coming out or something else is the problem, or is he too hungry to work up, and I just bring the bottle, that sort of, that memory just stayed with me so strongly, so that was those moments. But like, that's when I started to kind of go to these meetings regularly, even if I didn't have any issues with breastfeeding. I was just like, somehow this notion that I just need to be seeing things working out for other moms and just soak up that positive or just mixed experiences as well, just to see that others are kind of on and off as well and just, tumbling their way through it. But it's all good. It's part of the whole deal. And just to see that and be relaxed about it, that was really important. So I kind of went on it like a weekly meeting to fill myself up emotionally, really.
Yes, that was so important for me in my journey too. I went to one at the hospital, that an IBCLC that really supported me, held there for a long time. And finally, I had like the oldest baby. He was huge. And she said, she was so kind. She said, there are some Breastfeeding USA meetings, and there's lots of older babies at those, because all the babies at the hospital were like a few weeks old, maybe a month old, and I was going with like my 6-month-old. I was like, oh, okay. So then I found like the local, Breastfeeding USA support group, but I needed that support.
Yeah,
Just like you
yeah.
said, even if I didn't have a question, I just needed to go sit in a room with other people who understood these deep feelings I was having just about this process of trying to feed my baby.
Yeah, exactly. I needed my weekly dose as well, a weekly dose. Yeah. So eventually with him, we were able to kind of go on for quite a while, 18 months. So I find that very good. Now, he was an absolute booby guy. He just had it for everything. I was carrying him a lot. So he was feeding in the carrier. We were sharing beds, so he was feeding through the nights. So a lot of good, blissful moments of just being together. We were very fortunate that we could afford that I stay at home with him. So for the first 18 months, I was home with him, and yeah, so it ended up being a lovely journey. My husband it was interesting actually that, he really wanted to be part of it. So he felt like a little bit left out because we had such a lot of breastfeeding, a lot of contact with the babies. It's like, I want some of that. So that's why I was trying to pump. right? That's why I was trying to use the pumps, but that didn't really work out. So he never really got the experience of like feeding him and just, being the one who can do that part as well. But otherwise, he was very supportive, and that was so important. That was so important that he's really on board with this.
And did he find other ways to meet that need of wanting to connect with the baby? Often we associate feeding as like the highest form of connection, but dads of or partners of the primary feeding parent, they do have to seek out other ways of finding that deep connection, because there are other ways. So I'm wondering if he was able to find his footing there.
Well, he was trying a lot. And I think what he really kind of perfected with him is to putting him to sleep, rocking him to sleep, and singing to him. So he has like a very deep voice. So Tommy, that's the name of my first boy, he loved just kind of lying down on his chest. He was walking around with him rhythmically, like kind of dancing or stomping to the music that he was singing. And he just loved that. He loved that. Like sometimes, like he's nearly 10 now, but he still remembers those songs that he was singing to him at that time. So it's very interesting. So I think that's where he found that sort of connection. Obviously, he was able to do all of the maintenance things, changing nappies, the care tasks, right? Yeah, it's feeding and changing nappy, dressing, and all of that. So that's great. But that was something that it's more kind of deeply rooted. That sort of kind of being cuddled up, singing to him and rocking him to sleep.
I have a really busy week coming up, and I thought, what better way to reduce my stress than to go onto feastandfettle.com and order meals for that week, so I can just take one thing off of my plate by putting delicious meals onto my plate. See what I did there? So I went on to their website. It's really easy to use. I looked at all of the menu options for the week, and some of the things I'm excited about are some grilled steak tips with a delicious Thai peanut sauce and some green beans with a soy sesame sauce that's on the side. But there's so many other things. And that is one of the ways that I am choosing to provide self-care for myself so that I can reduce my stress load. If you would like to do the same and spend more time with your family and less time worrying about what's for dinner, go to feastandfettle.com to get home cooked meals delivered right to your front door. And you can get $30 off your first week's delivery by using my code MILK, MILK. And just let somebody else cook for you. You won't regret it. If you're listening to this podcast, then you are more than aware of all the barriers that can make feeding our babies so difficult. You are also more than aware that support can make all the difference. So if you are struggling to feed your baby in the way that you had hoped, or if it is more stressful or anxiety inducing than you had anticipated, then what are you waiting for? I am here for you. Go to my website, www.quabbinbirthservices.com. I can't wait to connect with you. I can help you take the next right step in your baby feeding journey so that you feel less anxiety and get more joy out of those moments when you are feeding your baby. I can't wait to hear from you. Talk to you soon. Okay, so anything else with your oldest, with Tommy, with your first?
I think that was all with him. I'm trying to think of when we finished, how we finished, because with him, it was me who kind of initiated the finish by that point. So he could have gone on, obviously, the evening feeds were the most precious for him and the morning feeds. So the daytimes kind of naturally kind of stopped. That was fine. He liked his food. So that was no issues there. But like the evening cuddles and the morning cuddles were the hardest to go. But then that's where daddy was kind of stepping in really nicely again, because like putting him to sleep without just by singing to him or something. That really worked. That kind of was able to kind of replace that sense of just feeling, close to one of his parents. And then the morning, just game times take over. When you wake up and do something interesting, that can kind of, for the few moments, distract him enough that by the time he's back on the idea of, like, oh yeah, where was the breastfeeding gone again? Then by the time it's breakfast time, and then so it was kind of naturally, well, with a bit of help from us, but we stopped it there at 18 months.
Okay. And did you have to do anything for breast care or to make sure that you didn't get engorged or mastitis by 18 months, or it
I had
was
mastitis once, so I had to take antibiotics for that at that time. And then what I found really helpful, actually, they had, I think they are called Lavi. It's like a breast massager. It's like it warms up and it kind of vibrates. So when I felt like, oh, it's an engorgement coming on, or I wake up with that feeling, if I use that at the back of my breast, while Tommy was breastfeeding, the two of us like that were able to kind of overcome that problem.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And then during weaning, did you have any difficulties or?
No, it was gradual enough. So yeah, that went really well. Actually, I was delighted about that there was no any issues there.
Okay. So is there a 5-year difference between your
5-year
first?
difference, yeah.
Okay.
With the boys, we wanted less, but well, clearly that's not our decision. They decide
Yeah.
to come. So
Uh-huh.
we were like literally nearly the point of saying like, oh, well, it's not going to happen. So we have to sort of kind of get comfortable with the idea that we will only have one. Then I got pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So we were delighted because then, we were able to have the second one. And it was at a time when I already was working on my project a year. So I was 1 year in my project at the university here in Galway when I got pregnant with the second one. So while I was doing this 2-year research and development project, I took a half-year maternity leave as well with the second one. So
Okay. Okay. And did you prepare any differently for the second, or did you feel like your first time breastfeeding kind of was the preparation for the second?
I think the first time breastfeeding was the preparation for it, really. So by the time we were at like, the 1 year mark or something with Tommy, I felt like, oh yeah, I got this under the belt. I've seen most of the things that I can come across with. I grew out of the idea that just because I don't see any milk in the bottle, Tommy doesn't get enough. Like clearly he was developing so well that so I
Mhm.
was able to overcome that as well. So yeah, that's I think I went into the second pregnancy and the second breastfeeding journey with a great deal of confidence about it. And as you know, my research project was related to that as well. So I picked up additional knowledge through the project itself. So I was very enthusiastic actually to get back to breastfeeding when the time came.
Yeah, and how'd it go?
It went really well, very easy. He was just a very easy baby with a very super laid back. So he never kind of complained about anything really. If there's not enough milk, yeah, it's okay. If it's too much, yeah, that's okay. So it was like a very easy baby. Like he was 10 days late. So he has a sense of just being super chill about things anyway. So, and because he was 10 days late, he was kind of a little bit more developed, right? So like 10 days matter, I think, those additional 10 days. So he was coming out a little bit more mature baby that you would get normally. Yeah. So I don't remember having any issues with him. The main issue with him was that he was finished way sooner than I thought he would, right? We stopped eventually at 11 months, so not even a full year. And I think he was telling me already from 9 months onwards that he's done with this. He was biting all the time. And I was just keep pressing on, thinking that, right, we'll just get through this and then you'll be fine. It's just a little difficulty that we're going to get through. But he actually wasn't interested in breastfeeding anymore at that stage. He enjoyed his solids, he enjoyed his drinks, so like drinking water, and he just wanted to chew. So he was only using my nipple as a chewing tool. And once we were kind of giving him chewy toys instead, he was way happier and he wasn't looking for the breast at all, which was something that I would like. I never seen an example for that, right? I always felt like that it's usually the babies who want to keep carry on, and especially that young, like a 9 months old, for me felt like, yeah, there must be an issue as opposed to him really wanting to stop or not being interested. But literally, he didn't show any interest, like even to the point of like me serving myself up on a silver plate to him, like, come on, it's, we can do this. And he's like, no, not even turning his head there, not zero interest. He moved on.
Wow. And how did you provide, because typically babies need breast milk or formula until a year or beyond. So how did you provide that to him? How did you?
Yeah, I was kind of expressing my milk at that point. I was kind of trying hand expressions and other types. I was a little bit more knowledge about breast pumps as well. Yeah, actually, I wanted to say that like back when I was first feeding my baby, my first one, there wasn't so many different inserts around, right, for breast pumps. So the flange, or like the significance of different flange sizes, there was some knowledge, but not that much. So with the second one, I was able to kind of utilize a bit more knowledge about that. So I was able to express milk more. And because he wasn't drinking anything, I had enough to kind of express and then just feed it in through the bottle for him. He was okay to drink it that way, but he wasn't interested in breastfeeding.
Wow. And I wonder if it was like a flow preference, if he
could have been
with the speed that it came out.
Could have been, but it only come around, maybe it was, I don't know. He's a big baby, that's true. Like he was born 10 pounds. So he was sort of always a hungry baby. But like, see, he didn't have any issues with that up to that 9 months, right? He was happy enough to feed from the breast, and he didn't get bottle up until that point either. So, but maybe when we started to drink water and stuff, that's when he kind of realized that, oh, liquid can come faster.
Yeah, I don't know. That's fascinating. Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important to tell these stories too, because babies are individuals, and these numbers that we give are about, how long your baby should breastfeed and duration of feeding and how long each session should be, and that they should, be on breast milk for 1 year and all these things. All of these are averages, but each individual baby is not an average. And obviously you have a thriving, healthy 4-year-old at this point, 5-year-old.
Four.
Yeah. And so it worked out just fine, and we have to remember that in the moment, sometimes we can really stress ourselves out about these baby things. And we have to kind of ground ourselves in the knowledge that we're going to make the best decisions we can in the moment. And sometimes we really do have to follow our baby's lead because they are individuals. They aren't averages. They aren't statistics, and they have their own opinions about things, and they can't tell us always why they're doing what they're doing. And so we can't always know. And it's interesting that he stopped so early. My clinical mind is going, of course. And in the end, like, you knew your baby best. And so you followed his lead, and it worked out great.
Yeah, exactly. Like I would, maybe if I would go back in time now, I would see a lactation consultant to see, do you see something here that I'm not seeing? Because sometimes, as you say, if you don't know, you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. Like there might be signs that are obvious for her to say, yeah, it's because of that. And if you use a shield or something, then, well, it's more like for the mom, but whatever, there might be some tips there that could help him overcome it, and then he would have gone back on it. But as far as I could read his cues, there was just no interest. I didn't see the interest in there anymore. I didn't see the keenness. I had a kind of wriggle around when the idea of that there's going to be feeding time. It's like, oh, the booby's coming, then their legs are kicking around. None of that. None of that. His head is turning away. But he was very much like he was maturing very fast anyway, in like very interested on the outside world very soon, right? So it felt like that his interest is elsewhere now, not on the being cuddled up for feeding. No, when I need food, I just want to kind of be done with it and start with my exploring the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And did you have to kind of grieve over this ending of breastfeeding?
I did, yeah, I did. I did clearly because I was keep pressing it on for another 2 months after he was clear that he wasn't so much into it anymore. It's because I didn't want it to finish. So for me, like these breastfeeding moments were always so precious, and I really enjoyed this amazing connection that you get with your baby with this. So yeah, I had a period of like kind of grieving, and I remember when I was pumping to kind of reduce gradually my milk supply. It's like it always felt like moments of goodbye. The baby's not there
Mhm.
anymore, milk is still here, but I know it's going to come to an end now. So yeah, it was a little bit emotional in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to ask if you have access to private practice IBCLCs in Ireland. How common is
Uh,
that?
there are, yes, they are. There are IBCLCs, there are lactation consultants, and they are great. I remember seeing one with my first baby. I didn't see anyone with the second one, but again, I had chats with lactation consultants because of my work. So yeah, they are absolutely available. Now, I'm not sure how it's in the US, but here if you have private health insurance, then some of them cover the cost of seeing a lactation consultant. Not necessarily all of them, but I was a public patient. I wasn't a private patient. So for me, it was like completely out of our own pockets, but that was fine because it's worth it. Like the advice and the tips that we got through there was very, very valuable. But I must say the real knowledge and the real help was through other moms, like
Mhm.
going into these groups and just picking up all that tiny knowledge, millions of tiny tricks and advice that comes through
I love
there.
that. Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. That's where I got my start too. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm still a part of Breastfeeding USA as a peer counselor,
All right.
and I work for them I volunteer for them on a national level because it was so meaningful to me, all the support that they provided me. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those groups do an amazing. The COVID kind of messed a lot of those groups up because the peer support had to go all online for a long time, and then I think people become so accustomed to not seeking out in-person support that it's become harder to kind of galvanize people to get out of their houses for in-person support groups.
Yeah, yeah. I remember our public health nurse saying it at that time because COVID was kind of the same time when my little one, the second one was small, that they see a big drop in breastfeeding rates because of not being able to do this. Like here, the healthcare, the public healthcare nurse here in Galway. I don't know if it's true in other counties, but here in Galway, they organize like a weekly meeting for
Mm,
newborns. So for babies and moms who were born in the same month, meet
mm.
up every week. And that's when they talk about breastfeeding and other feeding as well. So it's like kind of not exclusive for breastfeeding, but
Yeah, that's great.
of course, breastfeeding is a big part of these conversations. But she said since COVID and since these meetings had to stop during COVID, they see a huge drop in breastfeeding rates. So it's really important to have those in-person meetings. Like she said, they were
Mhm.
trying with Zoom and people come to the Zoom, but they still fall out with the breastfeeding journey because, yeah, you just need that. You need to be able to talk. You need the lactation consultant or the public efforts to see what you're doing, sit there with you,
Mm,
help with the positioning and all of those
mhm.
small details.
you've mentioned your research and development project a couple of times in talking about your work, and I'm going to have you back on to talk all about that. So I'm not going to ask specifically about it now. So as we wrap up about your personal story, is there anything else that you want to share?
Well, I think the only thing that I was thinking to share here is like for moms who are still expecting their babies to check out breastfeeding groups during their pregnancy to soak up that confidence and just ease that the other moms already kind of figured out for themselves with breastfeeding. I think that could really help at the moments when you have doubt setting in and you're just home alone with your newborn baby. So I would, that was the only thing I was thinking I will mention, because I think that would be really helpful.
Yes. Is there a specific group that you went to, that a specific network?
It was just, at that time, it was just organizing itself through Facebook. So it wasn't like in the US, I have seen that there's a lot of a lot of great kind of networks that exist. Like you mentioned, the Breastfeeding USA and other sort of, I know there's one in New Mexico that is super active, the New Mexico Breastfeeding Task Force. They have like very regular meetings with local moms. And so I'm pretty sure you can kind of figure out for your own local group. So find a local group as opposed to finding a bigger, more distant sort of support, but just like the local moms. I think that's just so valuable.
Yeah. And even if it's not breastfeeding specific, even if it's the library play group or the moms club, even if they have older toddlers or kids, they will welcome you in, and you need that social support. So, and they'll be able to answer your questions about breastfeeding because they've been there and gone through it. So
exactly.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for coming on to share your stories. And it's so meaningful to have somebody share a story that really highlights how critical getting out of your comfort zone. It can be hard to go meet strangers who you're just seeking out for this one support. But once you do, it can be so critical to success. And a lot of the research shows that can be the thing that keeps people going or not. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Well, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I know so many people can relate to this experience of being filled with doubt, either because somebody has said something to us, because the growth chart isn't what a provider wants it to be, or because our pumping journey doesn't align with our direct body feeding journey. And this is really very sad, because if we could learn to tune all of that out and just learn to look at our babies, many of us would have way less doubt. Now, I know that sometimes that really isn't possible. Many of us have to return to work, and we have to rely on breast pumps to be able to feed our babies, which is why I am so excited for you to tune in to Thursday's episode to hear what Eva did with all of her frustrations when it came to pumping. So come back on Thursday to hear all about those innovations. If you would like to discuss all the doubts that creep in and the various places they come from, because this is definitely a barrier to human milk feeding, then join my Milk Making Minutes community group on Facebook. This is where we talk about these sorts of things. And if one of the ways that your human milk feeding journey is impacted is because you cannot find the time to both pump and feed your family, then go to feastandfettle.com, where you can get $30 off your first week's delivery by using my code MILK, MILK, to get delicious food delivered right to your front door on your busiest of weeks. Thanks. Bye.